Hello, welcome to the third module. This week we'll talk about virtual social movements. It will be a continuation of our ongoing discussions about online politics, as we have done last week when we discussed the effects of personalization, customization, and participation, but also big data, data processing, targeted advertising. This week's topic will be more about how individuals, how we interpret the aspects of our social world in certain ways, and how do we motivate ourselves and each other to act collectively with other people to change the conditions. And I want to start with an argument that Loader has presented in his article from 2008 about how the internet provides alternative channels, alternative ways in which social movements can challenge the communicative power of mainstream politics, mainstream political media, and mass media institutions. We have seen examples of this in the so-called Arab Spring. This other example is from Hong Kong. The picture was taken from the protest movements in 2014, where young students, young people, and most of the population of Hong Kong took off to the streets to demonstrate, where they used extensively mobile apps to coordinate and communicate and inform each other about what's going on. And these changes with political movements, social environmental movements, shows us that gradually and increasingly cyberspace and the physical space, the urban space, the cities, the squares, the streets are becoming much more interdependent. Not independent, but interdependent dimensions of political activism. It is very difficult to organize masses without communication networks, but it is also difficult to achieve results and outcomes without the actual action. So the article talks about two different forms of relationships between new media and social movements. One would be its capacity, its potential to offer new types of social movements and protest movements. The other would be how it can enable and support and contribute to existing forms of protest. One example I wanted to talk about in this context would be what happened in Turkey in 2013. Although it's relatively an older case, the case of Gezi Park protests still requires some reflections in terms of how and why the street protest, the traditional forms of protest, coupled with the online forms of being together and acting together, the collective action frames, as we talked about last week, allowed people to coordinate, to inform each other by citizen journalism, for instance, sharing knowledge about what to do and how to overcome the difficulties, fact-checking, because there were quite a few examples of fake news, debating, opinion sharing, informing each other about different perspectives, and spreading the movement to the whole country. What happened in Turkey in 2013 started as an environmental movement. In the middle of Istanbul, there was a small park where the government wanted to build a shopping mall. And some young people from my university, Istanbul Technical University, actually started camping. They started reading books and making music. Having set up their tents, they started sleeping in this park to protect it. At a certain date, the end of May in 2013, the police suddenly attacked, burned down their tents, and arrested these young people, which led to thousands and then tens of thousands of people to the streets. Events took about 2 weeks, but the whole process took more than a month, where these people were on the street almost every day, often clashing with the police, and in some cases having really sort of brutal conflicts between police and the protesters. The movement obviously led to a larger base because it stopped being only an environmental movement about a park and then actually started bringing people together around a will for a more democratic country. This was mainly a middle-class movement where young people, young professionals, students, university students, for instance, academics, and several people who wanted to take part in the future of the country started to protest peacefully, at least in the beginning. And one reason for why people needed social media so direly was because of their distrust the mass media. A viral video that was released in Turkey back in those days, where one person took two TVs to show what the live broadcasting of CNN International versus CNN Turkey was all about. CNN International is showing the actual events and reflecting on what's happening in Turkey, whereas CNN Turkey was showing a documentary about penguins. People took it as the mass media being largely censored and not helping the protesters in any way. Based on one of the research studies in the recommended articles, the researchers have looked at the ways in which protesters are using social media, digital media, and why they're using them and why they think they needed them. As I said, this was a movement that was run mainly by people who have access to these tools and who are actually very active on these tools in their everyday lives. So it was used as a practical tool for cases such as contacting with friends in the protest zone, finding each other, moment-to-moment news sharing about what the police is doing, what the government decides to do, what happens in the other cities, and so on. Protection from or in some areas where there's some violent clashes with the police, informing each other, for instance, where medical help can be found, sharing food, sharing books, sharing knowledge about how to protect yourself from tear gas, for instance, fact-checking, also about mass media bias, and crowdsourcing, trying to come up with solutions to problems that are urgent and immediate. Here's another graph from a Turkish newspaper that shows the use of one of the main hashtags for the event, which was Diren Gezi Parkı, Diren meaning resist, and the number of users who are posting about the issue day by day. And you can see that the total number of users for this hashtag, the Diren Gezi Parkı, was more than 2 million, but there were also several alternatives for instance, each city. For the city of Ankara, there was Diren Ankara, more than 1 million. Diren Izmir, my hometown, it was about 500,000. Diren Beşiktaş is a small town in Istanbul, about 300,000, 400,000 posts about that specific neighborhood. What happened during the events was not only informing each other for using practical reasons, but different types of people sharing and informing about what's going on eventually led to some shared understanding and a collective identity, a shared history and memory, if you will. These are some of the characters that became viral. This woman in black, as she's called, the man who reads books to the police, the guitar hero, you might realize that the vehicle that is coming and the people that are approaching him are actually policemen. She was one of the main symbols for this whole movement because she was a research assistant in my university, again, Istanbul Technical University, just left work. She, as you can see, she's not prepared for any kind of conflict or clash with the police. She was just leaving the university and probably going home. During which she was tear gassed, and then this image, this capturing of that very moment became one of the most penetrating, more impactful viral images of the whole movement, which eventually led to street performances, other types of memes, cutouts that people can put their heads in and take memory pictures with, and several other events by this woman in red figure turned into this collective memory of the event. And several people in different cities have lost their lives during these events. These are some of the illustrations that turned viral after the loss of these people. As I said, these people have never met each other and never been in the same environment together, but through the collective memories and the identities of the people who took this as a responsibility, these images became the symbols for the whole movement. These kinds of user productions, these kinds of participations eventually lead social movements to have a new type of repertoire, a new type of action, and a new type of collective identity that people will bring together as a result of these interactions. But then again, as Zeynep Tüfekçi in her TED Talk is asking, well, if digital technology makes things easier for these movements, so why haven't successful outcomes become more likely?
Today's movements scale up very quickly without the organizational base that can see them through the challenges. They feel a little like startups that got very big without knowing what to do next. And they rarely manage to shift tactically because they don't have the depth of capacity to weather such transitions. Now, I want to be clear. The magic is not in the mimeograph. It's in that capacity to work together.
Internet offers cheaper, faster, more international, more effective political communication tools, more effective ways to mobilize masses, organize action, decide things, discuss things, inform each other. But then again, These potential opportunities must be weighed, according to Loader, that there are some challenges. For instance, diminishing face-to-face contact between people, losing touch with each other, getting disconnected, not sharing those precious moments of togetherness and solidarity through face-to-face means, and replacing that with weaker commitments of computer-mediated communication, such as using a hashtag and feeling like you have contributed, whereas the problem still exists. We also have to consider the increased amount and capability of censorship mechanism, surveillance capabilities, mainly by the disguise of providing security and safety, but also to tag people, to label people, to monitor people. In some cases, such as in the Chinese case with WeChat, some extreme conditions to censor free speech. We have also seen examples of this in Hong Kong. When I was teaching this class in 2014, I was actually talking about the Hong Kong movement as a very digital, highly online, highly social form of protest. Whereas in 2019, when the movements have gained momentum again, we have started reading articles about how these people are now considering other options, more private, more one-to-one or small group communications instead of public social media, because they were trying to evade censorship, avoid surveillance and monitoring of what they do. We have also seen examples of that in the Turkish case. During and after the Gezi protests in Turkey, thousands of people were questioned, arrested, and some of these people actually are still in prison. So there is this power relationship that digital media, yes, can challenge, but in some modes and in some levels cannot unfortunately compete with. So coming back to the article, what Loader calls new media-enabled social action, as he defines it, a new means of providing social movements and organizations, local activist networks, street protesters, with a more transnational global capacity to collaborate, to share information, and communicate with a wider audience. We have talked about Greta Thunberg's tweet in the first week when she says now the global environmental movement, the climate strikes are moving online because we cannot go on the streets, so we are going to strike digitally. They listen to the science, and right now science says that mass gatherings will cause harm, but that won't stop us from striking. In the second picture, as you can see on the right, it gives more specifics, a specific framing to engage with people and welcome them to the movement by giving them easy to accomplish steps. This actually reflects on what Loader calls interpretive framing. These are strategic attempts, strategic forms of communication by actors who shape and form the phenomena, such as the digital strikes, into culturally recognizable forms and problems and ways to tackle them, giving people a meaningful way to engage with the campaign, still feeling that they have contributed, but not really being confused about what to do and how to accomplish. As a result of this call for action, thousands of people have posted from almost all around the world with their unique signs, personalized messages, their backgrounds reflecting who they are and how they live. And this also shows us a new face, a new characteristic of these types of online movements. Online movements such as the school strike movement that Greta Thunberg alone has started by sitting down in front of the Swedish parliament, for instance. The protest has become ever more media conscious in the sense of it being organized as a media event. Well, I'm not claiming that Greta Thunberg were looking for publicity in any way. She was probably very honest and sincere about her individual reasons for why she was doing that. But the form, the format, the methods and the tactics that she applied, and the ways in which her message spread it throughout the internet and turned into messages such as these, also shows us that the new types of social movements, the new types of messages that spread and activate people to participate and join, also have these characteristics of how media enables these movements. As Loader says, framing of a campaign, framing of a movement, and communicating that with individual actors allows them to interpret aspects of their world and then motivate them to act collectively with others to change it. With the right framing, the motivation is much more meaningful for people because they can relate it to how they're living their lives and what kind of problems they're being faced. This example is from Sweden. It's called After Corona. where it invites people to talk about the situation of coronavirus and the economy of it and the types of groups and social classes that are being most radically affected by the crisis. How the welfare system will be taking care of the most vulnerable members of society, the old people, the sick people, the unemployed people. And as a part of this campaign, Swedish people actually started a whole new movement, which was aiming for people who are being affected by mainly the economic impacts of the crisis by demanding help and support from the welfare state. As the message on the left says, right now tenants are gathering in different parts of Stockholm and Sweden for joint action. In Moby, we have started a campaign with demands for 3 rent-free months for all affected and a total stop for all evictions. And some images from Instagram where some other people have shared their own messages and their own images with the yellow flag, giving the message to other people to share this. The next example is from Denmark. It is a group called Coronaknive. It's actually a hashtag, a Facebook page, and a group. And the message is, in the times of crisis, everyone has to be taken care of. It has a similar type of point. It is about bringing people together and enabling them to share their problems and their stories, mainly in terms of how their world, their business, their education has been affected by the crisis. Some examples from user posts here. The 2 girls that you're seeing on the left side are 2 international students coming from different countries. Through some regulations, they have lost their jobs, but also the government is now asking back some of the money that they have received because they are not able to work. Lauder stresses this concept of alignment between framing and the way people understand this framing. As he says, the interpretation of reality proposed by the actors, the people who are modifying and organizing these, and the population they wish to mobilize. We know that many people will experience a significant decline or no income at all right now and for a good while, and there will be very unequal help given by the politicians. Some people do not get even involved in the aid packages, but we don't know how many people it is. So how many are in the Coronaknive? Knibe meaning dilemma. Our goal is to get stories out, and you can see some of these stories also shared on Instagram. The last example I want to talk about today in terms of social movements is Venliboerne, an online group in Denmark which started around 2014 and had its major spread around the country beginning in 2015. These groups mainly are about helping refugees coming to Denmark. The point is to gather their resources wherever they're living and do whatever they can to help these people who arrive in Denmark in difficult conditions, in some cases with children and families, and helping them with adapting into the culture, integrating, learning the language, finding resources, or legal help. The group was co-founded by Mads Nygaard, you can see above, and also the TED Talk that I shared with you under this module, who tells the story of how a small refugee camp in a small Danish town led to this nationwide movement because people wanted to share and help and spread the word. As he tells the story, this was mainly about creating a local room, a physical meeting space for people who stay in this one refugee camp. Through their experiences with these social spaces, Matt says he decided to have coffee completely free for everyone. He realized that coffee is a binding force for people to spend time together. But the problem was they didn't have resources to have free coffee all the time. So they created a small group of local people saying, whenever you're driving by coming this way, please pick up a cheap bag of coffee, come and bring it here and leave it here and have a cup with us. And this led to people socializing, talking, meeting each other, and organizing for other types of action, more complicated but more meaningful types of action together. Here are some examples of what they do, including welcome packages, meetups, physical and online meetups about learning and sharing cultures. They're also doing workshops for children. They attended the Pride Parade together. They're doing fun activities, but also essentials like baby care and learning about certain healthcare information and things like that. And one thing that this network represents in terms of what Loader says about the nature of social movements would be how informal networks of autonomous individuals, people with their own free will, groups and organizations who can do something about the problem, a diversity of individual actors coming together and shaping a set of shared beliefs and collective identities. One of the largest networks in Copenhagen, for instance, would have about 40,000-50,000 members, but there are several local groups around Copenhagen, one of which is only for giving away free things, for instance, giving furniture, giving books, giving children's clothing, whatever these refugees might need and other people might have and don't need. This group can be used. This group has 25,000 people in it, for instance. And what Loader says, again, internet allows low-cost communication, a very fast and easy form of communication, and effective ways of networking for citizens and social activists. It also enables social movements to develop and mobilize as loosely coupled networks of local groups and individuals. This is what Venneboerne exactly represents. Loosely coupled networks of local groups and individuals, which when combined become a wider regional, national, or transnational alliance. These are some of the maps that I collected about Venneboerne. These are only 3 of the many different regions that Denmark has, which these maps are being made for. And as you can see in Sjælland, the region where Copenhagen also is, there are several groups with different members locally producing solutions. This is only about the Copenhagen area, and you can see in smaller areas around Copenhagen, there are smaller help groups or support groups. So what then? What does this new type of virtual social movement imply about the relationship between social movements and new media? Some of the important points I want to conclude with would be these. Well, new media definitely allows creation of both new types of social movements, but also support existing types of protest. It also improves the variety, the repertoire of forms, tactics, and practices, bringing people together in some clever, creative, engaging ways, turning things into challenges, giving people a chance to express themselves and spread the word to their own social networks. The concept of interpretive framing and alignment actually fits very well with what we have discussed about personalized politics last week. The ways in which internet allows organizations, protesters, and individuals to frame their problems in so many different ways that allows other users to find alignments with their own social worlds, with their own problems, and again, spread the word to their own social networks. But then again, never forget important challenges that new media brings to social movements, such as the role of this disconnection, the loss of face-to-face cues and togetherness, lack of commitment and solidarity, inequalities and different forms of inclusions or exclusions about older people, younger people, experts and non-experts, people who have access to these technologies versus people who don't have access. And of course, the question of authenticity, bias, and the loss of editorial control, the control that we would normally have with mass media and traditional forms of political engagement. Well, in online world now it's much looser, much more based on individualized forms of engaging and much less based on collective identities, memberships, and organizations. So all in all, we are seeing that new media has a significant impact in how we organize, collaborate, and motivate each other to do something about the problems we're facing. And in the times of corona crisis and post-corona, I'm assuming we will be seeing more and more of these examples, probably much more creative and much more effectively. But this is it for now. Thank you for listening and hope to hear from you in the discussions we have for this module. Take care. Goodbye.